Hi there tonight, we step into the stony sandals of ancient Greece where the sun's hot. The streets are dusty and the goats seem to be everywhere doing exactly as they please. As you shuffle past sun-bleached marble columns and try not to trip on uneven cobbles, you'll start to notice just how much this world was not built for you. Or anyone with soft, modern sensibilities for that matter. It's early morning in Athens. The sky is already blindingly blue. Cicadas are screaming from the trees like they've got existential crises, and you're sweating through your linen before breakfast. There's no air conditioning, no deodorant, and absolutely no iced coffee. You're already regretting this time travel experiment. Before you fully sink into your pillow, a quick like and subscribe would mean the world if you're into sleepy stories like this. Got a strange bit of history you want to hear before bed? Drop it in the comments. Tuck yourself in, slow your breathing, and let the past keep you company tonight. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive not in a dramatic thunderclap or through a shimmering time vortex, but just here. 1 second you're contemplating the concept of courage while brushing your teeth, and the next you're standing in sandals that don't fit in a city that smells like olive sweat and goat hair. The Acropolis looms in the background, proud and rocky, as if daring you to climb it. You won't. You're busy being overwhelmed. The agora or marketplace buzzes with noise vendors shouting prices, children chasing each other with sticks, and old philosophers yelling passionately about whether numbers are real. You're trying to figure out where to go and, more pressingly, how to pee. Welcome to Athens in the 4th century BCE. Population about 300,000, including a fair chunk of enslaved people visitors and itinerant philosophers. Everything's made of sun-baked, stone-shaded porticos and smells of charcoal and dried fish. You don't know it yet, but you've arrived during the Golden Age. If this is golden, you think it must be an acquired taste. First, the streets. There are no street signs or sidewalks. You just sort of hope for the best. You step carefully around something squishy and unidentifiable and immediately realize that the concept of sanitation has yet to be invented. A man passes you holding what seems to be a live chicken and a basket of figs, smiling like this is completely normal. Because it is. You're quickly realizing you don't speak the language. The Athenians are fluent in Attic Greek, precise, expressive, and utterly useless to your modern ears. You nod politely and hope that miming "help me" doesn't accidentally mean I challenge you to a duel, but even without words the city speaks. You walk past a man painting red figures on pottery, a child spinning a hoop, a woman with a giant jug balanced on her head. Life here is a sequence of carefully rehearsed movements, rituals and habits so old that no one questions them anymore. The sun climbs higher, you're sweating in places you didn't know had sweat glands. There's no shade unless you count huddling behind a goat. You consider it briefly. Hungry good luck. There's no bakery, cafe, or anything remotely convenient. You might be able to beg some dried figs from a kindly-looking grandmother, if you're lucky. Food is what you can carry, cook in one pot, or steal from a fig tree. The concept of snacking between meals doesn't exist. You're supposed to be fasting half the day anyway. Surprise. As you wander, you spot a group of men in tunics arguing in front of a public building. Loudly, passionately. Something about justice or maybe fish prices. It's hard to tell. In ancient Athens, politics isn't a career, it's a daily obligation. Think jury duty with more yelling. You duck into a shaded courtyard hoping for a moment of peace, only to discover you've accidentally entered a philosophy school. Oops. A group of students sits cross-legged listening to a bearded man explain that reality is an illusion and also that your body is basically a poorly maintained rental chariot for your soul. He gestures at you. Is this a compliment or an insult? You slink away before he asks you to define virtue in front of everyone. Time passes slowly here. Without clocks or phones, you track the day by shadows, stomach growls, and the smell of dinner fire starting up. Every hour feels like it could be a Tuesday or a Thursday, and honestly, nobody cares. You pause near a columned temple and lean against it, instantly pulling back. It's hot. Everything is hot. The marble radiates sun like an oven tray. In the distance, someone is singing what might be a hymn or a drinking song. Hard to tell. In Greece, those things often overlap. By now you're dusty, confused, and a little sun-drunk. It's only midday. And here comes a man with a jug walking slowly down the street, pouring water onto the stones. You think, how kind watering the road for dust control. No, he's marking it as a funeral route. The body's coming later. You step aside very respectfully. All of this, you realize, is normal. Ordinary. This is someone's Tuesday. The very things that feel bizarre and overwhelming to you, the open sandals, the communal debates, the smell of herbs and human effort, are just background noise to everyone else. You spot a woman grinding grain by hand, humming softly. A group of boys play a game with knuckle bones that look suspiciously like jacks. A man in a red cloak is either very drunk or very poetic, or both. You sit on a low stone wall, tired, overheated, and in desperate need of water that doesn't smell like bronze. Someone hands you a cup. You sip. It's wine. Watered down, served warm, of course. You'll learn eventually to pace yourself. To walk slowly, find shade often, and accept that you're not going to understand everything, and that's fine. The city doesn't care. The city has seen generations come and go. Philosophers rise and fall, wars start and end. You are but a tiny olive in its grand amphora. And somewhere a temple bell rings, or maybe it's a bronze gong. Either way, it signals something official. Probably a meeting, or a sacrifice. Or lunchtime. Maybe all three. You stand. You adjust your poorly tied sandals. And you prepare to figure out how on earth you're supposed to clean yourself up in a place where bathing might involve a strigil and someone else's olive oil. But that is for next time. You've survived the sensory onslaught of a single Athenian morning. Well done. But now your feet are filthy. Your tunic clings in all the wrong places, and you've started to attract the kind of body odor that suggests you've wrestled a goat, which here in ancient Greece may be tomorrow's reality. So, time to clean up. Except, there's no bathroom, no shower, no bath in the way you understand it. Welcome to your first encounter with ancient Greek hygiene part, exfoliation part, social performance part, smearing oil on yourself and scraping it off again. You find your way to a palestra, a combination gym, bathhouse, and social hub. It's a dusty courtyard surrounded by small rooms and shaded colonnades echoing with laughter grunts and philosophical debates in various stages of nudity. Everyone's either oily scraping off oil or preparing to apply more oil. The vibe is 1/3 locker room, 1/3 lecture hall, and 1/3 olive processing plant. You hesitate, then step inside. A thin man with a thick beard greets you with a nod, and immediately offers you a strigil, a curved bronze blade used to scrape oil and sweat from the body. He gestures for you to remove your clothes. All of them. Right here. In front of everyone. Oh, you're not ready. Everyone else seems extremely ready. A group of older men are vigorously discussing Homer's Iliad while rubbing sesame oil into their thighs. A boy no older than 14 is arguing passionately that Heracles was overhyped while balancing on one foot to reach his back. There's a lot of casual nudity. There's also a lot of eye contact. You do your best to maintain dignity. A young paedotribes or athletic trainer helps you through the steps. First, you oil up. Not massage, just coat yourself in oil like a very philosophical turkey. Then comes the scraping. The strigil is cold. The scraping is surprisingly satisfying, like peeling dried glue off your arm, but louder. Dead skin dust and questionable body aromas are flung aside like confetti. Historians still argue whether this method was genuinely cleansing or just ceremonial. Either way, you're now slightly less sticky and somehow shinier. No soap, no hot water, no loofah. And yet this is considered a thorough cleansing ritual. Congratulations. You sit under an olive tree in the courtyard, drying in the warm breeze. Your skin feels oddly tingly, and your hair smells faintly of thyme. You glance around at the crowd, students, old men, traveling merchants, and athletes all mingling like it's the most normal thing in the world to discuss ethics while entirely nude. A man nearby talks about Hippocrates, the famous physician, and how certain humor's bodily fluids, not jokes, must be balanced. You've apparently got black bile and yellow bile to worry about, along with blood and phlegm. Your current imbalance, probably excess air, whatever that means. Someone hands you a fig. You eat it without questioning its origin. Hunger is a powerful motivator. The conversation shifts to cleanliness and virtue. One man insists true purity is of the soul, not the body. Another claims that smelly people can't be wise. A third offers a loud, juicy sneeze and declares it an omen from Zeus. Everyone nods solemnly. You retreat to a shaded corner of the courtyard, quietly observing a servant polishing a bronze mirror with sand and vinegar. A young woman walks by holding a basket of fresh rosemary and mint, likely headed for one of the small rooms where massage and perfuming take place. Yes, if you're wealthy, you might cap off your olive oil exfoliation with a perfumed rub-down. If you're poor, you'll settle for a rinse from a cracked amphora and hope nobody notices the goat smell lingering in your hair. A man named Diodoros, he introduces himself with a flourish, offers to guide you to the next step: foot washing. This is not just politeness, it's essential. Sandals and dusty roads do not make for happy feet. He hands you a terracotta basin, a splash of rainwater, and a rag that might once have been linen. You sit, remove your sandals, and do your best not to wince. Foot care is serious business in Greece. Bad feet mean you can't walk the city, and walking is your only form of transportation. There are no carriages in these narrow streets. No donkeys for hire. Only your toes and the sandals strung loosely across them. While you work at the grime, Diodoros regales you with stories of his time in Sparta. He says the Spartans never bathe. Ever. That they believe in dirt as armor. That their baths are more likely to be wine poured over wounds than anything like what you've just done. You're not sure how much of that is true, but the horror in his eyes is enough to convince you to avoid a Spartan gymnasium at all costs. Someone nearby coughs dramatically and declares that washing removes the body's natural defenses. Others laugh. Apparently this debate's been going on for centuries. You thank Diodoros and stand more relaxed than you've felt all day. Your skin glows faintly. You smell like you've been rolled in an herb garden. And most importantly, you're not covered in dust anymore. But you're also keenly aware that this is not a private moment. Bathing in ancient Greece is a social event, one that can lead to friendships, mentorships, or occasional public shame. The wrong word, the wrong oil, the wrong gesture. And suddenly you're the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. As you exit the palestra, you pass by a small shrine to Hygeia, goddess of health and cleanliness. You whisper a quick thank you to her, just in case. You walk into the open air feeling slightly more confident and slightly less like a walking compost heap. But now you're hungry again. which is a problem because lunch in ancient Greece is not something you can just order. It's something you might have to beg for. You're cleaner now, sure, but also hungrier. The kind of hungry that olive oil scraping just doesn't cure. And that's saying something. Your stomach rumbles like a poorly built temple collapsing under philosophical weight. You glance around the agora, wondering where in this rock-strewn, toga-filled world a person might score a decent snack. Well, good luck. Breakfast, or ekritisma as it's called, isn't a grand affair. It's more of a don't faint before noon kind of situation. The Greeks aren't really into three-course breakfasts. In fact, if you want food, you'd better like bread. Because bread is the answer to almost every culinary question here. You make your way toward a small stall where a woman sells maza, a barley-based mush that somehow manages to be both chewy and suspiciously damp. She eyes you your oddly sewn tunic, your poor posture, your confused expression, and decides you probably need food more than you need dignity. You hand over a tiny coin. She hands you a wedge of barley mush wrapped in fig leaves. It's dense, sour, and about as exciting as reading a tax code out loud. Still, it's warm. You bite in. It tastes like ancient rules and wet cardboard. But it's filling in the way that glue is filling. You're pretty sure you're chewing history. As you sit on a low stone step near a philosopher's corner, you find yourself surrounded by men who are also eating maza, talking about truth justice, and how annoying it is when people misuse the word sophrosin. One of them gestures at your meal and quotes Socrates something about how moderation in food is the first step to moderation in all things. You are not feeling moderate. You are feeling like someone who wants cheese. Cheese a man near you says, catching your gaze. He introduces himself as Cleon, a food merchant. We have goat cheese if the gods are generous. He winks and hands you a small, crumbly chunk wrapped in fig skin. You take a bite. It is against all odds actually delicious. Salty, sharp, and somehow clean tasting. Ah, Cleon says please the goat that made this was recently blessed. You can taste the difference. You nod solemnly. You have no idea what that means. Now you're still hungry but less desperate, so you listen in. A young man nearby is loudly defending the superiority of figs over grapes. Another argues that cucumbers, while cooling, are dangerously moist in humor. You wonder how a vegetable can offend a bodily fluid. You eat another bite of barley and decide not to ask. Somewhere behind you, a group of young athletes walk by discussing the best wine to pour over a bruised shoulder. Apparently, vinegar and honey is the current trend. You make a note, avoid injuries, or vinegar. And there it is, your first glimpse of daily food culture in ancient Greece. There are no restaurants, no grocery stores, and certainly no delivery apps. Food is grown, traded, begged, or borrowed. Meals are simple bread olives, cheese, dried fruits, maybe a bit of fish if you're lucky or connected to Poseidon. Historians still argue whether most Athenians ate meat regularly. Temples often sacrificed animals, but the best cuts went to the priests, leaving everyone else to nibble at liver or suspiciously chewy bits. Lunch doesn't really exist. You eat when you can if you can. Dinner dipnon is the main event, but that's hours away. You wander through the market nibbling a wrinkled date. A woman yells about her sour wine. A potter is shouting that his amphorae are sturdier than his competitors' goats. You pass a fish seller who seems to be more interested in arguing than selling his fish quietly sun-drying themselves into ancient jerky. You pause near a stall selling honey cakes, mealtimes they're called. Tiny, sticky, perfect. You consider buying one when someone behind you mutters that honey causes sluggish thinking. You buy two out of spite. As the sun climbs higher, the city begins to slow. People find shade. Shops close their shutters. Dogs curl under carts. You follow a group of men toward a shaded portico where someone has laid out flat bread olives and, curiously, a small bowl of garlic paste. You try it, your mouth instantly regrets it. Your new friend Cleon laughs and hands you wine thin sour and very room temperature. It helps, he says. You're sitting now part of a loose circle of strangers who are not so much friends as fellow eaters. Everyone shares what they have except for the guy with the good olives. He guards those like a Spartan guards his shield. A flute player strolls by playing a tune that sounds like a sleepy bird's argument with the squeaky wheel. You don't hate it. Nearby, someone begins to tell a story about how one time Dionysus disguised himself as a mortal and drank half the city's wine supply before seducing a statue. Everyone laughs. You're pretty sure this is not canonical, but you let it wash over you like warm sea breeze. This is eating in ancient Greece. It's not just survival, it's social theater. You're expected to participate, to share, to talk, to tell stories. Food is a bridge between you and the people around you, and every bite tastes better when accompanied by gossip or philosophy. A man leans in and whispers a theory that figs grow best when insulted daily. The tree, he says, thrives on shame. You laugh, but no one else does. Apparently he's serious. You glance at the fig in your hand and say very quietly, "You're a disappointing fruit." Just in case. The sky begins to soften into gold. Shadows stretch. Someone hands you a final piece of cheese and someone else offers a fig leaf to wipe your fingers. You decline, it's already been used. You stand. Foolish, confused, slightly fermented, but you've made it through your first ancient Greek meal, and that you realize is enough to keep going, even if dinner is still hours away, and will probably involve more barley. You're still chewing barley residue when it hits you. You have no idea if you're dressed correctly. People have been giving you strange looks. Not aggressive ones, just the slow, assessing kind you usually reserve for someone wearing socks with sandals. Except here everyone's wearing sandals, and you're still not sure if you've offended a god-law or just fashion. You glance down. Your himation, a large rectangular woolen cloth you're supposed to wear draped artfully around your body, has slipped again in a way that reveals a bit too much thigh. Scandalous maybe, or maybe just poorly tied. It's hard to say. There are no zippers, no buttons, not even helpful little safety pins. Clothing in ancient Greece is all about the drape. And pins. Fibulae, to be exact. Sharp, decorative, and surprisingly political little things. If you pin something in the wrong place, you might be saying you're mourning, or married, or halfway to becoming a temple servant. You tug your fabric around you again, trying to copy the man walking by who looks effortlessly elegant, like he was born swaddled in a 100% linen. Yours still looks like it's trying to escape your body. A woman in a darker, more severe wrap glides past. Her head is mostly covered and her arms vanish into her peplos, a simpler rectangular dress belted tightly around the waist. She meets your eye for half a second, then disappears into a courtyard. Women's clothing in ancient Greece is practical and symbolic. Layers mean modesty. Color means status. Length means virtue. There's a strict choreography of fabric that tells the world who you are, what you're worth, and which gods you've recently sacrificed to. And yes, people absolutely judge you by your pleats. Historians still argue whether women had much choice in their style, or whether every outfit was mother-approved and temple-checked. Men, on the other hand, seem to have it slightly easier. A chiton, a tunic worn belted at the waist, is your basic uniform. Longer versions suggest you're a thinker. Shorter ones say you're probably about to jog somewhere with a javelin. Over that, wealthier men drape a himation, which can be worn multiple ways depending on how dramatic you're feeling and how cold the wind is. You attempt another adjustment. Now you look like a very anxious curtain. You ask a passing merchant for help. He sighs, spins you around once, yanks the cloth here and there, and steps back proudly. There, he says. Now you won't get mocked at the temple. Probably. You thank him. Then realize your belt is now looped over one shoulder. Intentional style. Divine accident. You decide not to touch anything and just hope for the best. Here's the thing. Your clothes are more than just protection from the elements. They're a public statement. In a world without Instagram or business cards, your hymation does the talking. Are you humble pious? A bit too flashy? That striped border. That might suggest you're a medic, a foreign resident with no voting rights, or a Thracian mercenary, or just someone who really likes stripes. Good luck explaining yourself. As you wander through the agora, you see how much fashion is tied to function. Young men wear shorter chitons to move freely. Older men go for longer, heavier cloth, even in the heat, because wisdom apparently requires sweating. Priests and temple attendants wear bleached white, and mourning women dress in dull, somber tones with veils that practically whisper, "Don't talk to me." Children wear... not much. A knotted belt here, a small tunic there. Their outfits look like someone started dressing them, then got distracted by a goat stampede. Shoes optional. Most people go barefoot unless they're traveling far appearing in court, or trying to impress someone. If you do wear shoes, they're either sandals tied with leather thongs or very basic closed-toe slip-ons that offer about as much support as a wet tortilla. You feel every pebble through yours. Every single one. There's even a thing called Crepides fancier sandals, often dyed or decorated for the elite. But if you're wearing them and don't have the social standing to back it up, expect snickers. Footwear is political. Everything here is political. You pass a tailor's stall. Bolts of wool and linen flap in the breeze, and a small group of people huddle around a new shipment of purple-dyed cloth. Purple. The color of wealth, royalty, and dangerously smug philosophers. You look. You do not touch. The dyes themselves are a whole story. Saffron for yellow. Woad and indigo for blue. A certain expensive red made from crushed bugs. And that rare expensive purple from murex snails, dozens of them crushed and fermented into a color that says, "I have both money and an odd tolerance for smell." Clothing has no sizes, only lengths. Everything is draped, belted, and pinned. If it falls off, you weren't trying hard enough. Or maybe you were trying too hard. And if someone spots your under thigh in the wrong context, scandal. Unless you're an athlete, then it's practically a uniform. And speaking of uniforms, military tunics are short, sturdy, and often marked with a symbol or color stripe. You're not wearing one. But a few curious glances from passers-by suggest they think you might be someone's very confused messenger. You duck into the shade of a stoa, a long covered walkway lined with columns, and watch the crowd flow by. A group of girls in matching green peplos laughing softly. An elderly man in something that looks like a wine-stained curtain, clearly unconcerned. A pair of city officials in almost too clean high-tons, their hair oiled to perfection. Everyone is performing identity through fabric. And you're a loose collection of flapping linen sandal blisters and mild embarrassment. Still, you've survived half a day and haven't been mistaken for a criminal or foreign invader. That's something. You tighten your belt, straighten your hymation, and start walking like you belong. Because here, looking the part is half the battle. You're dressed more or less and marginally less ridiculous than you were an hour ago. Time now to find your purpose. In other words, it's time to look for work. Because like everyone in ancient Greece who isn't independently wealthy, divine, or tragically mythical, you need something to do. The agora is the place to start. It's more than a market. It's the beating heart of civic life. Think job board meets gossip hall meets low-key performance art. Philosophers argue beside fishmongers, and political hopefuls make eye contact with anyone willing to listen or unwilling if they're fast talkers. You wander past a stall where a man is hiring flute teachers for wealthy households. He glances at you, asks if you can play, then dismisses you before you can answer. Apparently, the right kind of flute face is a whole aesthetic. Yours isn't it? Next up, pottery. A workshop door is open and the smell of wet clay wafts out. Inside, two men are slapping pots into shape with a rhythm that's both soothing and mildly alarming. You're invited to try your hand. You do. The pot you make collapses. Spectacularly. The potter pats your back. Maybe try basket weaving. He suggests gently already reshaping your mess into something usable. Out on the street, you see a chalked sign on a pillar. Wanted goat herder must not be afraid of heights or yelling. You look up at the steep hills surrounding the city and picture yourself chasing goats in sandals. You quietly back away. In a corner of the agora, a group of scribes are hunched over scrolls. One is carefully copying Homer. Another is making what appears to be a grocery list for someone who buys entirely too much fish. You ask if they're hiring. They ask if you know your letters. You admit, not in Greek. They wave you off with the universal gesture for bless your heart, but no. Historians still argue whether literacy was common in Athens. It seems many citizens knew at least enough to vote or read public notices, but professional scribes and poets held the real skills. Suddenly you hear a loud voice shouting about figs. Again. It's a seller looking for a helper to carry baskets. You volunteer. He hands you a load so heavy your spine files a complaint. You spend the next hour weaving through the agora with a basket of overripe fruit, getting elbowed by merchants and nearly flattened by a cart of amphorae. The figs leak onto your tunic. You are now sticky and vaguely citrus-scented. You are also paid 2 small coins and half a bruised pomegranate. Not glamorous, but honest work. Later, you hear laughter near the stoa. A group is gathering around a man reciting lines from Euripides. It's street theater, half performance, half impromptu political roast. The actor slips into different voices, mimics a well-known magistrate, and throws in a joke about the price of onions. The crowd roars. You inch closer. The man finishes his bit bows and drops a small cloth on the ground. Coins scatter across it. You realize this is a job too. Performance persuasion comedy. All of it has value here if you have the timing. You do not. You try a single joke about fig trees and shame. Someone snorts, not a laugh, more like a polite sneeze. You step back into the crowd and pretend to be very interested in a nearby gourd. Jobs here are fluid. You might be a mason in the morning and a fish scaler by night. People adapt. The city is alive, always moving, always bargaining. You see women weaving in doorways, children running errands, enslaved people hauling water and firewood with the precision of practiced routine. You watch a barber at work scraping a man's cheek with a blade so old it may have served in a previous war. Nearby, a cobbler hammers a sandal into something vaguely wearable. Across the street, a man leans out of a window yelling for someone to bring more garlic. And in all this noise, you start to understand jobs here aren't just about money. They're about placement, visibility, who you serve, who sees you, what you're known for. There's a booth where a man offers to tell you your future based on the lines in your palm. You decline worried, he'll just say sticky fig man and ruin your entire week. By late afternoon, you're exhausted. A temple cleaner offers you a seat in the shade and a sip of diluted wine. He's cleaning soot from votive offerings, small clay pigs, tiny bronze helmets, bundles of flowers that were fresh 3 days ago. He tells you temple cleaning is steady work. Quiet. Pious. Smells a bit like burned goat, but you get used to it. He gestures at the half-charred remains of what may once have been a sacrificial cake. And you learn a lot about the gods, he says. What they like, what they punish, what kind of incense makes them sneeze. You nod, grateful for the break. It's not easy finding your role in ancient Athens. There's no HR department, no lunch break, no health plan unless you count praying to Asclepius and sleeping in his temple while snakes slither around your feet. But there's rhythm here. An opportunity if you're quick, flexible, and comfortable being paid in food flattery or the occasional amphora of something pickled. You finish your wine. Your sandals are dusty. Your tunic is stained. And you still smell faintly of fig. But you've made it through your first workday. Barely. You've survived the agora, learned that not all jobs involve dignity, and now you're back on your feet wandering the sun-drenched alleys of Athens, still puzzling over one thing: where are all the women? You've seen a few rushing between shaded doorways, carrying water jugs, clutching fabric bundles, whispering behind veils. But they vanish like smoke. It's like living among ghosts with excellent posture. That's because in ancient Athens, if you're a woman, especially a respectable freeborn one, your world is smaller. Much smaller. It starts and ends most days in the gynaeceum, the women's quarters. That's the courtyard behind the home, the shaded section nobody but family and female servants visit. Let's pretend you've somehow ended up there reincarnated as a married Athenian woman, named, say, Cleto. You've got kids, a loom, and not a single excuse to leave the house, unless it's for a religious procession, a funeral, or a truly dramatic family emergency. Your day starts before sunrise. Not with meditation or journaling, no, with grinding barley into flour using a stone that's older than democracy. Your arms ache, your back is furious. But the family needs bread, and the family doesn't care about your rotator cuff. You manage the household, which means supervising enslaved workers, spinning wool, weaving cloth, overseeing the pantry, and ensuring the children aren't licking temple paint again. Your husband, off debating justice with Socratic types. You debating whether you have enough olive oil to make dinner, and still leave an offering for Hestia. Historians still argue whether upper-class Athenian women were truly secluded or just selectively invisible to the men writing the records. What's clear is that public life wasn't designed for you. Voting, number-owning property. Unlikely, attending theater. Only if you're lucky or attending in disguise. Yet you have power. Quiet power. The kind that keeps households functioning and rituals performed. You're the keeper of sacred domestic rhythms of fire and food and fertility. And if you're clever, you manage your husband's business behind the scenes while letting him think it was all his idea. Ancient gaslighting, possibly. Effective, absolutely. But let's say you're not born into wealth. Let's say you're a working class woman or an enslaved one. Then your world is wider but harder. You sell fish in the market. You carry water for 5 families. You maybe own a pet monkey. Athenians had those sometimes, but you definitely don't own a moment of peace. You walk the city with your head covered and your eyes down. Not because you're shy, but because the street is not your place. Men leer. Gossip travels fast. One misstep and suddenly your name's a punchline at the symposium. And yet women are everywhere in the background. Feeding, mending, birthing, blessing. You pass a home where a birth is happening. The screams echo into the alley. No hospitals, no anesthetics, just midwives' herbs and an extremely hopeful chant to Artemis. You pause at a small shrine tucked into a wall. It's dedicated to Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth. Someone's left a little figurine clay cracked, cradling a tiny baby. A silent prayer in statue form. Later you hear music. A group of women in fine garments is walking in procession headed to a temple. It's the Thesmophoria, a festival only women attend honoring Demeter and Persephone. No men allowed, not even to peek. Anyone caught trying risk a literal festival of humiliation. And what do they do there behind temple walls? That's part of the mystery. Some say they fast, others say they feast. There are rumors of piglet sacrifices and buried fertility symbols. Historians debate the details. What's certain is this: for a few days a year, the rules flip. The women are the ones leading rituals, shaping myth, embodying power. You watch them pass heads, high eyes forward, veils billowing, and you feel for a moment the ancient hum of shared purpose. But the moment fades, and the alley grows quiet again. You pass a loom shop. A group of girls sits cross-legged fingers, dancing over threads, learning the patterns that tell stories without words. Weaving isn't just work, it's myth-making. Remember, Penelope wove to keep her suitors at bay. Athena herself taught humanity the craft. If your cloth is crooked, your character might be too. Your feet carry you past a woman drawing water at the public fountain. She nods at you then at the statue of a nymph carved into the stone. She watches the woman, says, not clarifying if she means the nymph or the city itself. You glance back. The statue smiles just slightly. Creepy. Back in the household, your counterpart Clado prepares for evening. She'll bathe in a basin, oil her arms, and say a quiet prayer to Hera, not just for marriage, but for patience. She'll light the hearth signal dinner and correct her youngest, who keeps trying to ride the family dog like a chariot. You begin to see the pattern. Invisibility isn't absence. It's strategy. These women move behind curtains within walls under the surface of everything, and yet they're essential. They are the reason temples gleam threads align and olive oil doesn't run out mid-feast. You round a corner and pass a girl drawing something in dust with a stick. It's a face. Maybe yours, maybe Athena's. You smile. She doesn't look up. The sun dips. Lamps flicker on. Veils are adjusted. Doors creak closed. You sticky fig and all head home. Night is approaching, but before you can think about dinner or collapsing face first into whatever passes for a bed, you're hit with an unexpected greasy puff of smoke. Somewhere nearby, something herbal is burning, and not in a relaxing spa way. You follow your nose and your curiosity straight into the twisted, slightly alarming world of ancient Greek medicine. Let's be clear from the start, if you're hoping for anything involving penicillin anesthesia, or even soap, lower your expectations. Lower. Lower. Keep going. You find yourself just outside a modest home where a man wearing a slightly blood-stained tunic waves a bundle of dried herbs in your face and asks if you've been sneezing lately. You blink. He nods knowingly and says, "Too much wind in the soul." You've officially met your first iatros, or ancient Greek doctor. Though, in fairness, the term doctor here covers a wide range from semi-respectable physician trained in Hippocratic theory to a guy with a decent knife and strong opinions about leeches. Your guide, for reasons unknown, he insists on being called Lysias the Gentle, invites you inside for a diagnosis. Against your better judgment and under the influence of sheer narrative curiosity, you accept. The room is dim, smoky, and smells like garlic steeped in vinegar. There's a table of bronze tools that look more suitable for fish gutting than healing. You sit nervously. Lysias examines your eyes, pokes your stomach, sniffs your scalp. You pretend this is fine and declares melancholic imbalance. Your black bile is excessive. Historians still argue whether these humoral diagnoses were purely metaphorical, or if they genuinely believed melancholy leaked from your spleen. Either way, the treatment options are fascinating. Option 1, cabbage. Steamed mashed applied directly to your chest. You ask if it's for inhalation or consumption. Yes, Lysias replies. Option 2, bloodletting. He picks up a bronze blade and raises an eyebrow. You raise your hands and politely suggest cabbage. He nods, slightly disappointed. Option 3, travel to a healing sanctuary like the one at Epidaurus. There you'd sleep in the temple of Asclepius while snakes slither across the floor, whispering dreams of cures into your subconscious. You try not to scream. Instead, Lysias mixes a foul-smelling draft wine, garlic, rosemary, and what might be powdered snail. He hands it to you with absolute confidence. You drink it with none. He also gives you a small clay tablet engraved with the symbol of Hygeia. For balance, he says, and to warn off demons that cause foot cramps. You thank him, stagger out, and immediately reconsider every minor symptom you've ever complained about. Medicine in ancient Greece is a confusing swirl of empirical observation, divine intervention, and absolute guesses. There are trained physicians, especially those influenced by Hippocrates, who emphasize diet, exercise, and moderation. But there are also wandering healers, herbalists, and temple attendants whose treatments involve incantations, goat sacrifices, or reciting Homer backward. You pass a woman boiling herbs in a clay pot. She's treating her son's cough with honey poppy seed and crushed beetle shell. She swears it works. The boy coughs twice, then runs off barefoot screaming at a bird. Success! Nearby, a man ties a red thread around his wrist to prevent headaches. Another rubs fennel oil on his elbows to prevent envy. Yet another swears by daily sneezing into the wind to keep away mind shadows. You stop questioning. You've passed the threshold. Someone offers you a smoked eel to restore your stomach's fire. You decline. Your stomach has already filed for early retirement. The most reputable health advice comes from gymnasia, where young men are told to avoid excesses, eat bland food, and bathe regularly. Though the same gym also advises throwing javelins in the nude, so interpret reputable loosely. Mental health. That's a spiritual matter. If you're sad, it's because your soul is out of rhythm. You might be told to chant hymns, walk barefoot through sacred groves, or sacrifice something moderately adorable to Apollo. You find a quiet corner by a public fountain and watch as a man dips his feet in mumbling a prayer to Pan. He has a small cut on his heel, which he claims is a sign of divine impatience. You're not sure who's impatient, Pan or the heel. Later you spot a statue of Asclepius, his serpent-entwined staff, gleaming faintly in the twilight. Offerings cluster at his feet, eggs, olive oil, woven wreaths. Someone whispers that if you sleep near his shrine, you'll be healed through dreams. You wonder if those dreams involve less cabbage. It's getting dark, and the sick fade from the streets, retreating into homes or sanctuaries. Torches flicker. Incense wafts through alleyways. A man sings a soft prayer, his voice thick with smoke and faith. You're not healed. You still have sore feet, a cabbage aftertaste, and a minor existential crisis. But you're not alone. The city breathes around you, wheezing, aching, healing in its strange, scented way. You make a mental note, avoid doctors named after vegetables, and maybe, just maybe, give the temple snakes a chance. Later, after your thoroughly cabbage-forward brush with ancient healthcare, you're in desperate need of clarity, maybe even some divine guidance. And in ancient Greece, when things get confusing, itchy, or vaguely cursed, there's only one answer: go ask the oracle. Specifically the one at Delphi. Now, Delphi isn't just down the road. It's a holy site nestled in the mountains, days away by foot or donkey. But let's pretend you've fast-forwarded your dusty pilgrimage up winding hills past whispering olive groves and gnarled laurel trees until the marble columns of the sanctuary come into view. The air smells of thyme ash and sanctified goat, a good sign. You join the slow-moving crowd of pilgrims, merchants, warriors, and the occasional curious goat. They've all come seeking answers to love questions, to war questions, to should I invest in that fig orchard questions. And you're mostly wondering what the oracle might say about your extremely low tolerance for barley-based beverages. The sanctuary is grand yet oddly quiet. Stone paths lined with dedications from cities across the Greek world lead you to the Temple of Apollo. There are offerings everywhere, bronze tripods, golden leaves, small figurines carved from ivory or wood. Someone has left a pie. You sincerely hope that was intentional. You hope that before you can enter, there's a ritual checklist. First, purification. You wash your hands in the Castalian spring, a sacred source flowing from the rocks. Cold, clear, and surprisingly invigorating. You shiver. Probably not from the temperature. Probably from prophecy anxiety. Next, sacrifice. Don't panic, it's not you. It's a goat. The priest sprinkles it with cold water to see if it shivers. It does dramatically. That means the gods are listening today. You breathe a little easier, grateful to the goat for its theatrical flair. Now, finally, you're led into the temple. The light dims, the air thickens. Somewhere, a lyre plays a slow, trembling note. And there she is, the Pythia Apollo's priestess. She's seated on a tripod over a pit called the Adyton. Steam rises from a crack in the earth beneath her feet. Is it natural gas, sulfur, divine breath? Historians still argue whether the trance was chemical, psychological, or a bit of both. She sways gently, her eyes distant, but focused somewhere beyond time. A priest steps forward and asks your question on your behalf. You don't speak to her directly. That's not how this works. Your words are filtered, translated, made worthy. You hear her voice rise a language like Greek but twisted. A chant, a croon, possibly a warning. And then the priest interprets. Slowly, grandly, the stranger walks on sandals borrowed from Hermes, seeking clarity with barley in his belly. He shall find his answer in silence when goats speak and figs fall before they are ripe. Right, classic oracle. You're not sure what's just happened, but everyone around you nods solemnly. One woman bursts into tears of joy. A soldier looks vaguely horrified. You suspect you've just been told to hydrate and go home, but the experience leaves you weirdly serene. Something about being in the belly of myth, where gods speak through smoke and middle-aged women in trance, makes your modern worries feel manageable. On your way out, a priest hands you a sprig of laurel. Protection, he says. It smells like old tea. You tuck it into your tunic and pretend to understand everything. Outside the temple, the sun hits differently. Golden, filtered, almost smug. You stop to sit on a low wall beside a stone lion and watch the pilgrims come and go. You overhear a merchant whisper that the oracle once predicted a city's doom with the phrase, "The walls shall weep." Another insists she once saved his brother by warning him to avoid anchovies. He ignored her, he adds grimly. Now he's got gout. The oracle's answers are famously cryptic. Croesus of Lydia, a wealthy king, once asked if he should attack Persia. The oracle replied, "If you do, a great empire shall fall." He attacked. His own fell. Lesson always read the fine print of divine wisdom. You watch as a small boy places a carved toy chariot at the temple steps. His father bows low, murmuring thanks. For health, for safety, for a good harvest. Doesn't matter, the gods are always listening. Whether they answer or answer helpfully is a different question. You linger a while, letting the scent of pine and incense fill your nose. A woman nearby strums a lyre softly, and the chords wrap around your thoughts like warm linen. Then something unexpected: the goats. Not dramatic ones. Just three of them wandering freely through the sanctuary, completely unbothered by their symbolic significance. One looks you dead in the eye and sneezes. You remember the oracle's words. When goats speak, well, you decide that's your cue to leave. As you descend the mountain path, laurel in hand, you realize something. Whether or not you believe the gods' whispered answers today, you feel lighter. Like the past few hours were less about magic and more about surrendering to mystery. You still have no idea if you're doing ancient Greece, right? But now you're doing it with a prophecy in your pocket. You've consulted an oracle, dodged a goat sneeze, and somehow returned to Athens with both your sandals and your sanity intact. Barely. Now there's a new challenge on the horizon, and by horizon we mean the gleaming marble columns of the local gymnasium. You're not headed there to work out. Not exactly. But in ancient Greece, the gym is where people go to socialize, get oiled up, and yes, toss the occasional discus in the nude. You might as well embrace it. Or at least squint politely at it. You arrive just before midday. The sun is high, the shade is coveted, and the gymnasium is alive with the sound of men yelling about ethics while wrestling. You quickly learn that gymnasium comes from gymnos, meaning naked. So yes, this place is exactly what it sounds like. A wiry man named Thales, of course, his name is Thales, greets you with a nod, and immediately assumes you're here to train. He gestures toward a rack of javelins and a large amphora of olive oil. You hesitate. "Warm up," he says. "Do I drink the oil, you ask?" He laughs. You do not get an answer. The gymnasium is divided into zones. One for running, one for wrestling, one for the all-important pre-exercise oiling. The smell is overwhelming sun-baked stone sweat herbs, and what might be thyme-infused foot lotion. A group of young men are mid-sprint, their feet slapping the dust. Another group practices pancration, a brutal blend of wrestling and boxing with rules that can be summarized as don't gouge the eyes too much. You try a few warm-up stretches, attempting not to look like a folding chair caught in a windstorm. A trainer walks by, nods approvingly at your effort, and tosses you a discus. It's heavier than it looks. You throw it. It wobbles like a disgruntled pigeon and lands nowhere near the mark. Still someone claps. Pity clap maybe, you'll take it. You then notice the true heart of the gym. The petatribes, or athletic trainers, guiding boys through calisthenics while quoting Homer, and occasionally correcting posture with the stick. They don't just teach sports, they're philosophers with biceps. One man, a stout elder named Eumenes, lectures a group on the moral importance of a symmetrical body. The soul, he booms, requires balance. As within, so without. He then lifts a 30-pound stone ball like it's a loaf of bread. Historians still argue whether this obsession with bodily perfection was aesthetic moral or a sneaky excuse for people to be half naked in public 5 days a week. You sit on a low bench, catching your breath, watching as two men enter a friendly wrestling match. It begins with graceful footwork, then descends into the ancient equivalent of a cuddle fight. There's grunting. There's a fair amount of sand in places sand shouldn't be. Eventually someone taps out and both men laugh, embracing like long-lost brothers. Another match begins. One of the fighters is enormous, greased to a high shine and clearly more olive oil than man at this point. He waves at you. You wave back, terrified. Off to the side, older men sit in the xystos, a colonnaded area meant more for debate than deadlifts. They sip watered wine, argue about civic virtue, and mock people who overpronate their feet while running. You catch snippets of conversation. Aristotle says form matters more than outcome. Yes, but Aristotle never beat Milon in wrestling. I heard Milon once carried a cow up a hill. A cow, while composing a poem. Must have been a short poem. The gym isn't just about muscles, it's about mind and body in harmony. You're expected to reflect on truth while doing push-ups, contemplate the cosmos during your cooldown, and maybe solve a moral paradox while throwing a javelin. Also, you'll get very dusty. There's no shower. Instead, you head to the appetitarian, the changing room. A servant hands you a strigil. Ah yes, the return of the infamous scraper. You coat yourself in oil scrape off the sweat and dust, and finish with a spritz of rosemary water from a communal bowl. Then comes the massage. Optional but widely recommended. A young man named Mealy's gives your shoulders a quick rub, and between smacks casually asks if you believe in the immortality of the soul. You offer a non-committal grunt, and pretend the oil isn't dripping into your ear canal. By now your limbs are sore, your muscles confused, and your dignity clinging to its final thread. Still, you've survived the gym. And in doing so, you've entered a sacred Athenian ritual, not just of exercise, but of community. Of shared sweat, mutual groaning, and the unwavering belief that philosophy is best discussed shirtless and mildly winded. You gather your things, tunic slightly oil-stained sandals full of pebbles, pride patchy at best, and head for the exit. A group of boys waves goodbye, one yells, "Nice discus, stranger." You grin. Maybe they mean it. Maybe you just threw it like someone trying to scare a bird. Doesn't matter. You walk away feeling strangely proud, stronger, slightly shinier, and very, very in need of a nap. You've exercised in the nude debated ethics while dodging discus throws and survived your first Greek massage without weeping. Which means it's finally time for something sacred, social, and slightly chaotic dinner. But not just any dinner. Tonight you're invited to a symposium, the Greek dinner party of dreams and possibly nightmares. Think wine couches, flutes, philosophical ramblings, and the faint, constant thread of interpretive dance. You arrive after sundown at a modest yet elegant house in the city's upscale district. The door slave lets you in with a quick nod, clearly sizing up your outfit, your sandals, and your general vibe. You pass. Barely. Inside, the Andra on the men's dining room is set. Cushions line the perimeter of the room. Low tables are scattered with ceramic cups, jugs of wine, and a suspicious number of lyres. Everything smells like roasted goat honeyed bread and the faint tang of spilt wine from last night's festivities. The host greets you with theatrical warmth. He's in a crimson tunic and wears a garland of ivy which looks more like a repurposed wreath. "Welcome, stranger," he cries. "Tonight we honor Dionysus and logic." The other guests nod solemnly. One of them immediately tries to quote Plato and mispronounces half of it. A good sign. You recline on a couch. Yes, recline. Sitting upright is for servants and senators. Real philosophers dine like decadent cats, sideways elbow-propped hand, casually plucking grapes or gesturing with intense conviction. First comes the food. A slave brings out platters, roast meats, grilled fish, soft cheese olives, and small honey cakes shaped like animals. You taste a piece of chicken that's been stuffed with herbs and fig paste. It's absurdly good. You blink twice to confirm you're not hallucinating. You reach for wine. A younger guest gasps, "Not yet." The symposiarch or wine master has not yet declared the evening begun. He's a serious-looking man with eyebrows like angry laurels and a cup shaped like a tiny theater mask. He clears his throat. "Let the mixin' begin," he announces. The wine arrives, but it's not poured straight. It's mixed roughly 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Because drinking undiluted wine is considered barbaric. The kind of thing only Thracians or people with dental problems do. The crater, a large mixing bowl is brought in. Cups are filled. The first libation is offered to the gods. You raise your cup awkwardly, copy the others, and murmur to Dionysus. Someone across the room raises an eyebrow but says nothing. Then music. A flautist begins playing a soft warbling tune. Someone starts clapping in rhythm. Another guest, clearly a regular at this sort of event, sings a slightly off-key hymn to the muses. The mood warms, shoulders loosen, laughter bubbles. And then the questions begin. What is love? One man asks already 3 cups deep. Like a sneeze, another replies. Unexpected and strangely satisfying. A boy with a lyre argues that love is divine madness. The philosopher next to him counters that it's a form of hunger. You suggest it's a trick of the wine fumes. This earns you a round of approving chuckles and one dramatic toast. As the wine flows, so do the confessions. One guest admits he once wrote a poem about a fig tree. Another reveals he's never understood geometry but nods enthusiastically in public discussions about Euclid. There are gasps, applause. Someone starts reciting a riddle about turtles in time. Historians still argue whether symposia were more about intellectual engagement or competitive drunkenness. The answer is probably yes. You listen as a silver-bearded guest tells the story of how he debated a Spartan warrior during a drinking contest and won with a speech about onions. Another man begins a slurred ode to his lost sandal, tragically swept away during last week's flood. A flute joins him halfway through. It becomes a duet for a sandal. There are games too. Kodabos involves flinging the last drops of your wine at a target, usually a bowl or a small statue. You try it, you miss. Badly. The wine hits a nearby curtain. Everyone cheers anyway. Later, a woman enters the room. She's a hetira, a courtesan, trained in conversation music, and the art of not laughing when a philosopher misquotes Homer. She joins the circle, plays the lyre with skill, and immediately dominates the debate about whether fate can be altered with enough wine. Of course it can, she says, especially if you spill it on someone important. As the night deepens, so does the absurdity. Someone begins a game of impersonating animals. You watch a grown man pretend to be a very tired dolphin. Another guest claims he's discovered a new element called laughterium that lives in the soul. You nod as if this makes sense. It kinda does now. By the 5th cup, the room is full of philosophical declarations, spontaneous haikus, and one man doing slow somersaults to better understand gravity. He crashes into a pillow. The group claps. You eat another honey cake, sip the last of your wine, and realize something strange you're comfortable. Reclining among thinkers, clowns, and wine-stained poets, you feel like you've always been here. The symposiarch stands wobbling only slightly. Enough, he declares. Now we sleep. Or sing ourselves home. Half the room lies back dozing. The rest hum a lullaby dedicated to Selene, goddess of the moon. The lyre gently fades. The flautist snores mid-note. You close your eyes. Your cup is empty. Your tunic is stained with fig and philosophy, and your soul is strangely full. Morning comes too early. You wake on a borrowed cushion smelling faintly of diluted wine honey cakes and someone else's sandal. Your head is foggy, your mouth dry, and your back gently informing you that it was not meant to sleep on marble tiles. You squint at the thin sliver of sunlight slicing across the Andron. Most of your fellow symposium guests are gone, dispersed into the city to nurse their hangovers with dry bread and louder than necessary political opinions. Which reminds you, it's court day. That might sound boring. But in ancient Athens, the courtroom is one of the loudest, most chaotic, and most oddly theatrical places you'll ever find yourself. It's law drama and personal grudges all rolled into one. You stagger to your feet, adjust your tunic inside out, how poetic splash your face in a cistern, and make your way toward the Heliaia, the central court. The street is already buzzing. Men in cloaks rehearse speeches. Others, clearly professional witnesses, loiter casually by the gates waiting to be hired. Yes, you can hire witnesses here totally legal as long as they say what you want them to. Sort of like Yelp, but with more sandals. As you approach the court building, you're handed a small bronze disc. This is your Pinakion, your juror token. Athenian trials are judged by citizens, hundreds of them selected by lot that very morning. You look at your token. Your juror, Pike years 291 today. Oh no. You've just been drafted into a legal system that makes modern bureaucracy look like a smooth jazz concert. You're ushered into a massive open-air courtroom. There are no judges, no lawyers, no powdered wigs. Just a large crowd of citizens, a few magistrates, and the two parties, the accuser and the accused, each prepared to argue their case directly, loudly, and with as much dramatic flair as humanly possible. The accused today is a man charged with illegally cutting down sacred olive trees. Serious business. Those trees are protected by the gods. Cut one down and you're not just facing a fine, you're risking divine vengeance and public disapproval. A lethal combo. The accuser begins his speech. He's well-dressed, theatrical, and completely unbothered by the birds circling overhead. He claims his neighbor not only cut the tree, but did it while humming disrespectfully at Artemis. The crowd gasps. Someone drops a fig. The accused counters. It was already half dead and the wind pushed me. He then quotes Hesiod for emphasis. You're not sure it helps. No lawyers, no rules of evidence. Just clever words, audience reaction, and a water clock clepsydra to keep everyone honest. Each speaker has a limited time measured by water dripping steadily through a clay vessel. It's calming and stressful all at once. You, along with your fellow jurors, listen. Some mutter, others nod thoughtfully. One guy is asleep. You feel important, confused, and mildly dehydrated. Historians still argue whether these enormous juries led to true justice or theatrical mob rule. But they definitely led to volume. Athenian courtrooms are loud. After both parties speak, it's time to vote. Each juror gets 2 small discs, one with the solid axle, one hollow. You drop your choice discreetly into a bronze jar. The hollow disc means guilty. Solid means not guilty. You vote. The jars are shaken, the discs are counted. Guilty. The man sighs, the crowd nods, and someone mutters something about replanting and goat manure. Justice, as always, comes with landscaping. You sit back trying to absorb what just happened. Justice in ancient Greece isn't about cold logic. It's personal, it's communal. It's shouted in public and backed by myth. The laws themselves are etched in stone around the city, literally. Everyone's expected to know them, or at least pretend convincingly. Your day's not over. Outside, another court session is forming. This one's about slander. The accused supposedly called his neighbor's bread unfit for dogs. A shocking insult. More shocking, he said it in public. Even in a city where people scream about metaphysics over dinner words have weight. You slip away before the bread trial begins. You've heard enough shouting for one morning. As you walk through the agora, you notice something. People are still talking about the olive tree case. A man's arguing that the gods were obviously angry given yesterday's sudden windstorm. Another swears he heard the tree cry. You don't question it. You stop at a stall for a piece of dried fruit and the vendor grins. You vote today, you nod. He hands you a fig for free. Apparently justice comes with snacks. By midday the courts settle. Citizens drift off. Some return to workshops. Others huddle under porticos to debrief and rehash every rhetorical flourish. You rest in the shade, mentally replaying the speeches, the crowd reactions, the steady drip of the clepsydra. You didn't expect it, but you feel it now, the strange thrill of being part of something civic, chaotic, and uniquely Athenian. No suits, no gavels, just words, courage, and enough noise to wake the dead. You look at your empty fig leaf wrapper and think, maybe you'll come back tomorrow, assuming no one cuts down another olive tree. The courts have adjourned, your civic duty is fulfilled, and for once you're not coated in fig residue or olive oil. But before the day winds down completely, you find yourself swept up in something no less sacred but infinitely stranger, a religious festival. And not just any religious festival. This one has masks, animal skins, torchlight music, and at least 3 people dressed as satyrs. It is unmistakably a celebration in honor of Dionysus. Or possibly Demeter. Or maybe both. You're not entirely sure, and neither is anyone else. The key thing is it's loud, it's ancient, and you are definitely underdressed. The festival began at sunrise, but now at dusk it's in full swing. You're in a sea of color tunics dyed in rare hues, garlands of ivy robes streaked with wine. People carry clay figurines, ceramic jugs, and offerings wrapped in linen. The city has become a stage. You follow the procession through the winding streets drawn by the rhythmic thump of a drum and the clatter of sandals against stone. A flute wails overhead and a group of children scatters petals with surprising aggression. Suddenly someone hands you a torch. No instructions, just here, hold fire. You do. The procession slows before a small temple. Priests in flowing robes chant verses older than memory. They toss barley into the air, your old friend barley, and light incense that smells like smoky roses and something vaguely medicinal. A man dressed as a bull god dances through the crowd, snorting, bowing, leaping. 2 young women, likely priestesses, twirl beside him, arms outstretched, eyes closed. The flames from your torch flicker on their faces, giving the scene the unmistakable glow of myth. You realize you're standing inside a reenactment of a story you've only vaguely heard before, something about rebirth, sacrifice, the underworld, and wine. Always wine. Festivals like these are woven into every part of life in ancient Greece. They honor the gods, yes, but they also reinforce community. Everyone participates, from the wealthiest merchants to the scrappiest fig sellers. Even enslaved people are often included, allowed moments of sacred celebration, and for one night the rigid structures of Athenian society bend. Roles blur, boundaries dissolve. A woman with silver-streaked hair grabs your hand and pulls you into a circle dance. The steps are simple, 2 to the left, 1 to the right, spin, shout, but the rhythm is infectious. You spin, you shout, you lose your sandal. It doesn't matter. Someone sings a hymn to Demeter. Another responds with a call to Persephone. The echo bounces off the marble walls like a chant from the earth itself. Then food. Tables appear seemingly from nowhere. Platters of pomegranate seeds, roasted chestnuts, fresh cheese, dried dates. You eat like someone who's danced off all dignity, which, to be fair, you have. A storyteller steps into the firelight. The crowd hushes. He begins a tale of a farmer who tricked Apollo with a carrot and a well-timed sneeze. The moral is unclear, but the delivery is flawless. Laughter rolls like thunder across the gathering. Then comes the part you weren't prepared for: the sacred play. It's not theater as you know it, it's ritual. A chorus of masked men sings in unison, their steps thudding like heartbeat. They reenact a god's suffering and triumph, maybe Dionysus again, or maybe Orpheus, losing Eurydice for the 2nd time. The audience is rapt. No one dares interrupt. Even the goats are quiet. Historians still argue whether these plays were for education catharsis, or just good old-fashioned divine entertainment. All you know is that your leaning forward mouth, slightly open, absolutely caught in the ancient rhythm. And then it ends, just like that. The masks come off. The torches are extinguished one by one. People embrace. Some weep. Others laugh too loudly, drunk on story and wine and something deeper. You help clean up because ancient Greek festivals are also bring your own broom affairs, and find yourself sweeping flower petals beside an old woman who swears she saw a god tonight. Which one, you ask? She smiles and says, whichever you needed. You carry that with you as you walk home. Your feet are sore, your head is full of music, and your tunic smells faintly of incense and goat fur. But something in you feels lighter, as if for one night the veil between mortals and gods thinned and you were allowed to peek through, just for a moment. You've danced with priestesses, carried fire, and sweated through goat-scented linen under the gaze of half a dozen gods. But just when you think ancient Athens might give you a break, someone runs past shouting one word that chills your blood war. Okay, maybe not full-scale city-sacking war, but a campaign, a nice little regional conflict where young citizens prove their metal older strategoi, yell at maps, and you get drafted for reasons that were probably explained in a fast-moving public vote you slept through. Congratulations, you're now part of the citizen militia. That means you fight. Or at least you stand in formation looking serious while trying not to drop your shield. It begins with your summons, a small wooden tablet, handed to you in the agora bearing your name, sort of, and your assignment. You're to report at dawn to the next, the Gathering Hill, along with the rest of the city's military-age male population. You show up bleary-eyed, tunic-rumpled, armed with confusion. An officer, he introduces himself as Phylon, with the confidence of someone who shaves with a sword, inspects your sandals, and frowns. You'll need armor, he says, and a spear, and possibly a better posture. You're taken to the armory. If you thought ancient Greek warfare was all glory and discipline, you're about to be deeply disappointed. The armor room is chaos, bronze helmets piled like cooking pots, mismatched greaves clanging to the floor tunics that smell like old stew. You're handed a linothorax, a stiff linen cuirass, and a Corinthian-style helmet with a nose guard that makes breathing optional. The shield aspis is enormous, heavy, awkward, decorated with what might be a lion or a very confused cat. You try to hold it and the spear at once. You look like a dinner platter trying to fight a lamppost. Still, you're now a hoplite, a citizen soldier, part of the phalanx, the key to Athenian might. You join your unit on the training field. The commander gives a rousing speech about duty, honor, and not stabbing your fellow Athenians by accident. Then it's drills, march, stab, brace, shout. Again and again and again. Your arms feel like boiled barley by midday. Lunch is a hunk of bread, a boiled egg, and a ladle of watered wine. You eat sitting on your helmet, trying to pretend your shoulder doesn't feel permanently out of place. Nearby, someone's playing the aulos, a kind of double flute used to keep marching rhythm. The sound is somewhere between urgent snake and panicked goose. Still, it works. The phalanx tightens. You're shoulder to shoulder with sweating men, all holding spears forward in a bristling wall of potential doom. Historians still debate how well this worked in practice. In theory, it's all precision and solidarity. In reality, one stumble sends everyone toppling like armored dominoes. After training, the veterans gather under a tree to swap tales. One speaks of a campaign in Thrace where snow froze their sandals. Another tells of a skirmish near Thebes where a single goat caused a full retreat. Loudest goat I ever heard, he mutters, eyes haunted. You ask what battle's like. The oldest man, his beard streaked with gray and wisdom, leans in. It's loud, he says, and hot. And mostly about not running away before the guy next to you does. The others nod. Also, someone adds pee before you form up. You won't get another chance. That night you sleep in a barracks with 30 other men. The floor is hard, the snoring relentless, and one guy keeps muttering about the Spartans stealing his spoon. You dream of tripping on your own spear and waking up in a different city-state. Dawn comes fast. You march out of Athens heading toward the practice battlefield, a dusty plain just past the olive groves. The sun climbs, the armor cooks, you sweat. A lot. Suddenly the signal horn blares. You form up heart-thudding breath, shallow. The phalanx locks shields. A drummer starts pounding a steady beat. Across the field, another line of hoplites does the same. It's a mock battle, but nobody told your legs that. They're convinced this is the end. You advance. Step, 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 thrust. The shield jolts with impact. You stumble. A spear tip grazes your arm. Someone behind you yells left, but everyone moves right. The line buckles. You fall. You land on your back, blinking at the sky through your helmet slit, wondering if voluntary exile might have been an option. Then someone hauls you up. You're not dead, he grins. Congratulations. It's Phylon. He slaps your back hard enough to dislodge a fig seed from breakfast. By afternoon, the battle is over. You limp back toward the city, dusty, bruised, and bizarrely proud. You survived the phalanx. You didn't impale a friend. You only dropped your spear twice. Back in Athens, the city is quiet, peaceful, but you know, should the need arise, you'll be called again. You're a citizen. That's your duty. And now you know how to wear a helmet without fainting. Mostly. Your heroic phalanx performance behind you, and most of your dignity retrieved from that dusty battlefield, you return to Athens with a new appreciation for soft beds, flexible joints, and any task that doesn't involve bronze armor or charging goats. But just when you're starting to think you might be a free man again, you discover something sobering. You're not doing most of the work. You're just watching. Everywhere you look, the true machinery of Athenian life moves around you quietly, invisibly, because it's carried on the backs of people you haven't really seen yet, the enslaved. Athens, that shining beacon of democracy, learning, and fig distribution, is built on a deeply unequal foundation. Nearly 1/3 of the population is enslaved. That's right. For every swaggering citizen with a philosophical opinion, there's someone else chopping wood carrying amphorae or being told to oil someone else's feet. You begin to see them now. The man sweeping the temple steps enslaved, the girl fetching water in the marketplace enslaved, the cook roasting meat behind your symposium also enslaved. And yet they aren't all the same. Not even close. Some are born into slavery. Others were prisoners of war. Some were kidnapped from foreign lands or sold due to debts. There's no single face of servitude, just 1,000 variations of invisibility. You meet one eventually. His name is Damo. He's owned by a well-off family who treat him well, which in this context means they don't beat him unless he drops the oil jug. He tends their garden, keeps the amphorae full, occasionally tutors their youngest son in arithmetic. He's polite, quick-witted, and visibly exhausted. You ask him if he's always lived in Athens. He nods. Since I was 9, he says, I was a wedding gift. You don't know what to say to that. He shrugs, adjusts a basket, and heads off toward the fountain. You notice how many enslaved people do the same thing every day, wake before sunrise, work until long after dark, and blend into the corners of society that doesn't write about them. Unless, of course, they misbehave. Then they become cautionary tales. Punishments vary. Some are fined, others are beaten. A few are branded. You hear a merchant boast that his slaves wear collars inscribed with, "Return me to Agathon." You hope he loses sleep over it. He probably doesn't. Historians still argue whether some enslaved people could earn their freedom through work or favor. Some did, most didn't. Even the philosopher you overheard quoting Socrates this morning, he owns 3 people, one of whom you're told does nothing but manage his scrolls and keep his ink from drying. Enslaved people are everywhere doing everything. Some are domestic workers. Others are skilled artisans, cobblers, smiths, potters. In fact, many of Athens' most beautiful ceramics were shaped by hands that would never vote or be remembered by name. You pass a workshop where a man throws clay on a wheel, his hands practiced and steady. He hums a hymn to Hephaestus as he works. He wears no tunic, just a belt and sandals, and his back is marked with old scars. His pots are perfect. He won't get credit. In the silver mines at Lorien, the story is worse. Their enslaved laborers, many of them children, dig through toxic dust for the ore that funds Athenian wealth. No fresh air, no pay, no exit. You overhear someone call them walking coins. You wonder what Athens would look like if all of its enslaved people walked away tomorrow. Probably quiet, probably confused, probably very, very hungry. Still, it's not all invisible drudgery. Some enslaved people live in relative comfort. Those in wealthier households might manage accounts, teach children, or even advise their masters. In rare cases, they're trusted, even loved. Some own property or run errands solo. But freedom, that's a different story. You hear whispers about a few who bought their liberty or were granted it for loyalty service or just plain luck. They become metoikoi resident foreigners. Not full citizens, but freer than before. Kind of like getting a hall pass out of an endless school day. You ask Damo if he ever thinks about that. He chuckles. Of course, he says. But Athens doesn't like to lose its workers. It likes to praise freedom while holding the reins. He walks off again, his sandals kicking up tiny clouds of dust. You spend the rest of your afternoon noticing the ones you didn't see before. The girl folding tunics by the stoa. The man cutting fish in the shadow of the Acropolis. The boy trailing behind his master carrying 2 bags and a flute. The city doesn't function without them. And yet their names are lost, their stories unrecorded. And you suddenly feel the weight of your borrowed privilege. Your feet ache, your hands are soft, your duties are optional. But for so many others, labor is life. Work is fate. And freedom is a dream stored away like silver in a deep, dark mine. By now, you've settled into a rhythm. Wake, walk, sweat, get confused. Eat something vaguely fig-adjacent and attempt not to offend any deities or goats. But just when you think you've finally mastered daily life in Athens, you return to your borrowed lodging and discover a new reality. You're not alone. You share your space with others. Not people, not gods. Creatures great and small, some welcome, some deeply uninvited. Welcome to the wild and occasionally itchy world of ancient Greek domestic life, where pets, pests, and ambiguous animals coexist under one terracotta roof. Your first discovery ants. Lots of them. They march across the threshold like they've paid rent. They're not afraid of you. You try to shoo them. They regroup. Ants in ancient Athens are organized and possibly immortal. You swat one. Another appears. You whisper an apology to Artemis, just in case. The house you're staying in is modest. Clay brick walls, a wooden roof, and doors that creak like dramatic actors in a tragedy. There's no glass in the windows, just wooden shutters and reed screens. The gaps let in light, and other things. Your second discovery, a small lizard lives behind the amphora near the hearth. You name him Leonidas. He blinks at you slowly, a miniature Spartan on his own tiled battlefield. You try to make peace. He flicks his tail like a half-hearted curse. Then come the mice. Not rats, those are more a dockside problem, but little twitchy-nosed scurriers who treat your leftover breadcrumbs like sacred gifts. You leave out a few in the corner, figuring if you feed one, it'll leave your sandals alone. Historians still argue whether this qualifies as a cooperative pest policy. Either way, it seems to work. But it's not all nibblers and skitterers. Some of the animals are deliberate housemates. The neighbor keeps a cat. Or rather, the cat keeps the neighbor. It comes and goes as it pleases, occasionally leaving gifts like half a grasshopper or an ambiguous feather. The children adore it. The adults tolerate it. The mice fear it. You're impressed. Elsewhere in the city, you've seen dogs, some thin and twitchy, others dignified and clearly aware of their pedigree. Greeks keep dogs for herding, guarding, and occasionally just for company. One boy you meet introduces you to his mutt, Clepsydra. She's named after a water clock, he explains proudly. Because she's always late. You do not ask what she's late for. Then there are birds. Pigeons roost in the eaves. Doves coo from cages. One wealthy woman is said to keep a talking parrot imported from somewhere east, with a vocabulary of 5 words and a spiteful sense of timing. And yes, monkeys. Some Athenians, especially the very rich or the very eccentric, import small monkeys as exotic companions. You see one in the market wearing a tiny cap and eating a date with profound concentration. It glares at you. You back away. But by far the strangest pet you encounter is the snake. Not just any snake, a temple snake. At the shrine of Asclepius, sacred snakes are allowed to roam. People feed them honey cakes and whisper prayers. You spot one coiled serenely in a sunbeam, clearly aware of its divine status. One woman nearby touches its tail for good luck. You decide to admire from a distance, a very respectful distance. Inside homes, some families even keep non-poisonous snakes to control pests. You're not sure whether this is genius or insanity. Possibly both. And while we're on the subject of pests, lice. No one talks about them. Everyone has them. They're like uninvited guests at a symposium, small, persistent, and difficult to politely remove. You overhear someone say that wearing a sprig of mint behind your ear keeps lice away. Another swears by garlic. A third recommends rubbing your scalp with vinegar and cursing under your breath. You try the mint. You smell like a walking salad. At night, the domestic zoo goes quiet, sort of. Leonidas returns to his amphora. The mice sneak their rations. The ants conduct a silent conference near your sandal. The neighbor's cat yowls at something you sincerely hope is imaginary. You lie on your straw-filled mattress listening to the scratch of tiny claws, the chirp of night birds, and the soft whoosh of a moth beating its wings against the ceiling beam. Pets in ancient Greece aren't just accessories, they're symbols, companions, workers' omens. A good dog means loyalty. A bad-tempered parrot means you overpaid. A snake in the right context is sacred. In the wrong context, it's dinner. You begin to appreciate how this living ecosystem, though chaotic, has its rhythms. Your lizard keeps bugs in check. Your mice respect the crumb corner. The cat next door guards the threshold. Even the ants. Well, they teach humility. You whisper goodnight to Leonidas. He blinks once. That feels like acceptance. And you fall asleep surrounded by creatures who don't care who you are, where you're from. Or whether you can pronounce Clepsydra. You're just another warm spot in the dark. After nights filled with mouse diplomacy and lizard standoffs, you've earned a proper rest. Or at least what passes for one in ancient Greece. Because here's the thing. Sleep isn't just something you do. It's something you prepare for, ritualize, and on occasion apologize to the gods about. Tonight we explore what it means to sleep the ancient Athenian way. And spoiler alert, you won't be counting sheep, you'll be praying to Hypnos and trying not to inhale too much straw dust. Your room is small and dark. No windows. Just a narrow wooden door, a clay oil lamp, and walls that seem to whisper every word spoken within a 3-house radius. You hear someone sneeze next door. You whisper, "Bless you," just in case. Your bed is a cliné, a kind of elevated cot. At first glance, it looks decent. A wooden frame, a mattress filled with straw or wool. But the moment you lie down, your body begins a long conversation with every lump and poking stalk. You adjust your position. The stalks adjust back. This will be a negotiation. No pillow as you know it. Just a folded cloak or a cushion if you're lucky. You use your arm for a while, then switch sides, then consider just sleeping, standing up like a respectable amphora. Before sleep, there are rituals. You light a small lamp with olive oil. Not for reading that's over. The lamp is there to keep the shadows friendly. You murmur a quiet prayer to Hypnos, god of sleep, and his brother Thanatos, god of death, because, just in case tonight's nap becomes more permanent. Then there's the dream protection. People in ancient Greece take dreams seriously. Dreams are messages, omens, sometimes even visitations. To avoid nightmares, some people sleep with amulets under their pillow. Others hang herbs above the doorway, lavender bay leaves, or a small bundle of garlic. You've tried all three. You still dreamed about wrestling a goat with Plato's face last night. You lie back and take stock of the sounds. Crickets, distant flute music, someone arguing with a donkey. The city never fully sleeps. Even when the torches burn low and the marketplaces shut down, life continues in whispers and footsteps. Your neighbor's daughter hums a lullaby. It's gentle circular about the moon sailing over fig trees. You don't understand every word, but the rhythm is soothing. You imagine a little child curling up beside a warm clay stove, soot on her cheeks and a clay doll under one arm. Historians still argue whether most Greeks slept through the night or in 2 shifts. There's evidence that people often had a first sleep followed by a period of wakefulness, then a second sleep before dawn. During that break, people might pray, meditate, even go for a stroll. You hope you're not expected to go anywhere. You drift for a while. Then come the noises. The cat fight. The thunder of amphorae crashing somewhere down the alley. A baby crying, a rooster who does not understand time. You roll over, groan softly, and try again. Eventually, Hypnos does his job. You find yourself dreaming. You're walking along the beach, and the sea is speaking in hexameter. A dolphin offers you grapes. You ask for wine. The dolphin shrugs and says, "That's a symposium problem." You awaken before dawn. The sky is bruising toward blue. The oil lamp has sputtered out, leaving a faint trail of smoke curling toward the rafters. Your back aches. One leg is asleep. Your pillow has somehow become a sandal. But you feel rested. Sort of. In this world, sleep isn't easy. There are no blackout curtains, no mattresses that adjust to your spinal preferences, no white noise machines unless you count the snoring of goats outside. But there is rhythm. The quiet surrender to night, the flicker of lamplight on clay, the warm heaviness of the air, the prayer you whispered, the dream you barely remember, and the small, sacred act of waking still yourself, still wrapped in a tunic and maybe, if you're lucky, with only a few new straw marks on your face. You rise, stretch, and step back into the city, blinking against the dawn. You've survived another Athenian night, and somehow you didn't even dream about the snake this time. Progress. You faced nightmares, lizards, and the straw mattress that time forgot. Now, as dawn stretches across the city in long amber arms, you step back into the public life of Athens, only to discover that today's drama isn't theatrical. It's political, and you, dear sleeper in a democracy, are expected to participate. Yes, today is one of those days when the machinery of the Athenian state churns to life. And you, an adult male citizen, or at least passing as one, are required to be an active cog. No exceptions. Not even for people who barely understand the difference between ostraca and ostraca the dish. The first thing you notice is the crowd. It starts near the Meeks, the rocky hill where the assembly meets. Citizens, some enthusiastic, most grumbling, gather under the rising sun, sipping watered wine and arguing about seating. There are no microphones, no podiums, just a raised platform, a speaking stone, and a very vocal population. You squeeze in among men from every walk of life, potters, farmers, poets, and at least one man who smells suspiciously of fermented turnip. They've come to vote, to shout, to listen, and mostly to shout again. The atmosphere feels part town hall, part sporting event. Someone waves a fig branch in support of a candidate. Someone else throws an olive pit at him. The herald calls for order. You do not envy him. A priest offers a prayer to Zeus Hera and Athena Polius. The assembly must begin under divine watchfulness. The crowd bows. Some mutter. One man offers a side prayer to Hermes just in case there's unexpected travel. And then the first speaker steps up. He's loud, eloquent, and passionate. He argues that Athens needs to invest in more ships, that the fleet is the key to power protection and fish access. He gestures wildly, throws in a few lines of Homer for drama, and ends with, "Do you want Spartans on your doorstep?" Murmurs ripple through the crowd. One man yells, "Only if they bring wine." Laughter, then hissing. The next speaker takes a stand, an older gentleman with a voice like gravel soaked in honey. He argues the opposite Athens should focus on roads, not ships. The countryside is suffering. Merchants are complaining. And let's face it, Spartans probably wouldn't last a week in Athenian traffic. Debate heats up. There are no political parties in the modern sense, but factions form around personalities and policies. There are the traditionalists, the expansionists, the philosophical purists, the economic pragmatist, and the guy who just wants lower grain prices. You learn quickly everyone votes, everyone yells, everyone thinks they're right. Historians still argue whether this was true democracy or a beautiful mess of elite manipulation and impromptu shouting. You're leaning toward the latter. Then it's time to vote. You receive a small shard of pottery and ostrakhan. Your task: inscribe the name of someone you believe should be ostracized, exiled, voted off the island of democracy, so to speak. Why? Because they're too powerful, too persuasive, too smug, or just mildly irritating during symposia. You hold the shard. You think, do you write the name of the man who spoke too long, the one who insulted your sandals, the fig seller who always shortchanges you? You hesitate. Democracy is tricky. Eventually, you scribble a name badly and toss the shard into the collection jar. It joins hundreds of others, all scratching out the future one vote at a time. Ostracism. It sounds dramatic, but it's not permanent exile, just a 10-year political timeout. Most come back often to applause. Still, no one wants to hear their name read aloud at the end of the vote. Next on the docket, a grain import tax. Then a discussion on improving the public fountain. Then, shockingly, a proposal for regulating street musicians. The debate spirals. Someone proposes licensing flute players. Another insists the music is sacred. A third demands the right to duel any musician playing off-key near his home. The crowd howls. Someone pretends to play a flute badly. Someone else throws a date pit. Democracy at work. You sneak away before the final votes. Your brain is full of policies, pebbles, and passionate appeals. Your ears ring, your stomach growls, but you're oddly proud. You were part of it. A cog in a talking machine. A voter in sandals. You pass a scribe jotting down summaries on a wax tablet. A child asks her father who won. He shrugs. "We all did," he says. Then adds, "unless they tax wine." Then we riot. You smile. Athens may be imperfect, loud, dusty, occasionally governed by whoever yells loudest and brings the best cheese. But it lets its people speak, even when what they're saying is less flute, more bread. After a long day of shouting, citizens scribbled ostraca and that one man's haunting impression of a dying flute. You crave silence. Maybe even a story. A bedtime tale, preferably one without voting procedures or sand in your sandals. Lucky for you, the Greeks are masters of myth. It begins as night falls. You find yourself sitting beside a small fire in a shaded courtyard surrounded by neighbors, travelers, and a few children who absolutely should be asleep. But no one sends them to bed. Not when the storyteller arrives. She's older with silver-threaded hair and a voice like warmed honey. She carries no scroll, No lyre, just a worn shawl and a gaze that demands your attention, she begins. And just like that, you're no longer in Athens. You're in a cave where a baby god wriggles beneath a stolen cloak. Hermes, fresh from his crib, has already invented the liar committed his first theft and casually lied to Zeus with a grin. The crowd chuckles. The children gasp. Someone whispers, "Classic Hermes." She shifts the tale. Now you're underwater. Amphitrite swims beside a giant sea cow. Poseidon builds her a palace from coral and regret. You wonder how much myth is just poorly translated emotion. Next, you're in a dark forest watching Artemis loose a silver arrow at a hunter who dared speak of her beauty too publicly. He became a stag, the storyteller says softly, and his own dogs did the rest. No one laughs this time. You listen as gods love mortals, punish kings, chase stars, and occasionally turn into swans. Or trees, or cows. Transformation is always a risk in these stories. You're warned about hubris, always hubris. Icarus flies too close. Arachne weaves too proudly. Niobe boasts too loudly. The gods don't do constructive criticism, they do curses, and sometimes eternal thirst. Historians still argue whether these stories were moral instruction or simply entertainment. You suspect both. They're lessons disguised as dreams. The storyteller pauses to sip wine. Someone offers her a fig. She accepts bites and continues without missing a beat. Now she tells of monsters. Typhon with 100 snakeheads in a rage against Olympus. The chimera breathing fire and confusion. The gorgons whose stony glares could ruin a whole week. But she balances each nightmare with a hero. Bellerophon rides Pegasus. Perseus tricks the mirror. Heracles, in a fit of redemption, cleans an impossible stable. The crowd cheers. You can smell the manure. Then comes Orpheus. Gentle, doomed Orpheus. He sings so sweetly the stones weep and Hades softens. But he turns too soon. Eurydice slips back into the shadows. The fire crackles. No one speaks. Even the children are quiet. The storyteller does not explain. She lets the silence hold. Then, with a slight smile, she shifts again. You hear of Pan dancing in the reeds, of nymphs who become springs, rivers, laurel trees, of Echo whose voice still haunts the hills. The myths tangle together, half memory, half moonlight. The sky deepens. Stars blink awake. The fire pops. She ends with a lesser-known tale, the kind not found in every scroll. A poor man, nameless in most versions, gives a god a drink of water. No ceremony, no offering, just kindness. The god disguised as always blesses his garden, and for the rest of his life the man grows the sweetest figs in the land. Someone sighs. You realize your shoulders have relaxed. Your breath has slowed. You're tucked into the folds of a story older than stone. The storyteller stands. She bows. Someone hands her a coin. Someone else whispers, "Tell it again tomorrow." She nods. She always does. The crowd drifts off one by one. A child imitates Medusa's glare and is gently swatted by her older sister. You remain by the coals, thinking. In this world, myths are more than bedtime stories. They're guideposts, warnings, mirrors. They teach courage, humility, patience, and the value of not offending owls. You look up at the moon and think of Selene gliding across the sky in her silver chariot. Somewhere a dog howls. Somewhere else a lover prays not to wake up alone. And you head to bed full of gods and monsters and strange little truths wrapped in golden lies. You sleep easier tonight, because when the world makes no sense, there's always a myth to explain it. You wake to the sound of dripping, not poetic morning dew or ceremonial hand washing. Just dripping. You sit up and realize your roof is leaking. Again. Which wouldn't be so surprising if it had rained, but it hasn't. Not in days. You squint at the ceiling. The clay tiles, sun-baked and lovingly arranged by someone with questionable craftsmanship, have shifted, or cracked, or possibly been sabotaged by a particularly vengeful pigeon. Welcome to the reality of ancient Greek housing, charming to look at, slightly less charming to live in. The average Athenian home is a modest affair, one story, maybe two if you're lucky, and the neighbors don't mind shadows on their courtyard. Built with sun-dried mud bricks over a stone foundation, it's sturdy enough in theory, but not exactly weatherproof. The roof, made of wooden beams and terracotta tiles, offers a romantic view of the stars and a direct invitation to insects, rainwater, and occasionally disoriented cats. You scramble to move your belongings away from the leak. There aren't many your hymation, your sandals, a mostly empty amphora of wine, and a small clay lamp shaped like a lion who regrets everything. Outside the street is a muddy slip of path. Someone is sweeping it with a bundle of twigs tied together with string. The broom sheds more twigs than it gathers. She sweeps anyway, a good neighbor. You try to patch the roof with a piece of pottery and what might be a fig leaf. It does not work. You look around the house, inspecting the damage or lack thereof. The courtyard is flooded. The cooking hearth is damp. The walls are sweating. You decide not to ask. Ancient Greek homes are often centered around this open courtyard, which seems brilliant on a sunny day. But during storms, it turns your home into a tasteful indoor pond. You pass through the gymnasium, the women's quarters, on your way to the storeroom. It's quiet now, empty, echoing with yesterday's loom work and faint herb smells. You pause to admire the careful organization, baskets of grain oil jars, hanging onions, a suspiciously silent mouse hole. You find a cloth, soak up some puddles, and mutter a prayer to Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Not because you think she caused this, but because you need someone to hear your frustrations. Then comes the real shock. The neighbors are dealing with the same thing. One man appears on his roof with a bucket and a jug of wine. It's unclear if he's repairing something or negotiating with the tiles. A woman to your left yells at her chickens to stay inside as if they understand weather patterns. You remember hearing someone say Athens wasn't built in a day, but it was patched in 10,000. You now believe this. Historians still argue whether these domestic struggles were common across all classes. Wealthy homes had better materials, stone, marble, tiled floors, but even those weren't immune to time rain and the occasional goat kicking in a door. You head to the agora to buy replacement tiles. The potter named Neocles sells you 3 for the price of 2 and throws in a 4th because you look roof-cursed. He's not wrong. Back home, you climb a rickety ladder made of 2 sticks and a prayer. You reach the roof and inspect the tiles. One is cracked straight down the middle like a philosophical debate gone wrong. You replace it. Carefully. Slowly. And promptly get stuck. You sit there on the roof sandals, catching the edge of a tile, contemplating the sun. This is domestic life. It's not all myth and theater and fig banquets. It's leaking roofs and wet sandals and wondering how ancient people survived thunderstorms without panicking. You eventually climb down, victorious, slightly dusty, smelling of clay and effort. You mop the floor. The lizard watches you from behind the amphora. You dry your bedding in the courtyard. A neighbor compliments your tile work. You nod like someone who didn't almost cry into a cracked beam this morning. By evening, the sky has cleared. A breeze slips through the shutters, rustling the herbs above your door. The house smells clean again, like time smoke and humility. You light your lamp, sit on your still damp stool, and look around. It's not glamorous, it's not grand, but it's home. And sometimes that's enough. The leak is patched, the lizard is once again ignoring you, and your hands still smell faintly of terracotta glue and regret. As the sun sets behind the temple skyline, Athens exhales. The city grows quieter, softer, like a story nearing its final chapter. But not before you face one more truth. In ancient Greece, the end of a day is a gentle reminder of the end of all things. Tonight, you walk a different road, one that leads not to the gymnasium or the agora, but to the edge of the Kerameikos Athens cemetery. It's not just a place for the dead, but for the living to remember how thin the line between the two can be. The path is lined with marble steely tall, slender grave markers, carved with scenes of farewell. You pass one of a woman holding a dove, another of a young man clasping his father's hand. They aren't grand, they're intimate, quiet. You reach a small altar where incense smolders in a cracked dish. Someone's left a handful of barley. Another has placed a tiny wreath of olive branches. Offerings to Charon, the ferryman of the dead. Tradition says coins must be placed in the mouth or over the eyes of the deceased to pay for the crossing over the river Styx. You dig into your pouch. You have no coins left. Just a round seed polished smooth by worry. You leave it anyway. Nearby, a family performs a ritual. They pour libations, wine honey, a little water into the earth for their ancestors. The children imitate their elders, splashing more than pouring. No one scolds them. The dead, it seems, don't mind sticky fingers. In Athens, death is a part of daily life, not feared so much as folded into it. You hear stories told not in hushed tones, but with warmth. He danced like Dionysus, one woman says of her late uncle, even when he shouldn't have. Laughter, a tear, more wine. Cremation is common. The body washed, anointed with oils wrapped in linen, placed on a pyre. The smoke rising is both farewell and offering. You've heard of the 3-day funeral, laying out the body at home, carrying it in procession at dawn, burying it with care and speeches. Women wail professionally. Men tell stories. The community comes together as if death were a feast for memory. One man tells you his grandfather believed that how you're remembered matters more than how you lived. Which is lucky, he adds with a wink, because he was terrible at farming. Historians still argue how much mourning was personal versus performative. But it's clear that remembrance was communal. You lived not just for yourself, but to be etched into the minds of others. As you walk back toward the city gates, you pass a woman lighting a clay lantern. She places it by a stele with no name worn smooth by time. Just in case she whispers. In case someone's still waiting to be remembered. The stars begin to blink on. The marble glows pale in the moonlight. And you begin to think about your own end. Not in a grim way. More like housekeeping. What would they say of you? The strange one who wore sandals backward and didn't know how to oil a shield. The one who asked too many questions about goats. Maybe. But maybe they'd say he listened. He learned. He helped patch a roof. Not much. But enough. Back in your courtyard, the lamp flickers. You sip watered wine, offer a crumb to Leonidas the lizard, and lie back on your straw mattress. Somewhere the gods watch. Somewhere the shades of the dead tell their stories to each other again and again. And somewhere in the earth below, the coins still gleam faintly beside bones wrapped in linen. Not payment. Memory. You close your eyes. Not with fear. With gratitude. Because in this strange, sweaty, sacred world, you've seen it all. Life, death, figs, and philosophy. And somehow, you made it. So here you are, sunburned, fig-fed, moderately fluent in philosophical muttering, and somehow still standing after an entire Athenian day and several nights. You've worn the sandals, tasted the barley, and been yelled at by at least 3 philosophers and 1 goat. You've debated democracy, patched a leaking roof with dignity, only slightly intact, and politely declined a snake massage. And now, it's time to say goodnight. You lie back once more on your humble straw mattress, your tunic rumpled, but proudly your own. The moon floats above the clay-tiled rooftops, casting long silver shadows over walls smoothed by time. The soft chirping of crickets blends with the distant laughter of someone probably drunk, hopefully poetic. This city never truly sleeps. Even now in the deep hours, you hear it breathing, the groan of beams adjusting to the cool. The shuffling of sandals down the street, the murmur of two friends debating something. Too small to matter and too beautiful not to. You breathe in the quiet. Your body aches, your feet protest, but your mind somehow floats. You think of the strange path you've walked through courtyards and courts, temples, and symposia, gymnasia, and gutters. You've watched gods whispered into firelight, coins lowered into tombs, stories offered like olives, bittersweet, oddly shaped, never perfect. And yet all of it matters. This world isn't simple. It never was. It's full of contradictions, freedom built on slavery logic, tangled with superstition democracy, punctuated by theatrical shouting and fig-based bribes. But it's real. And you've seen it not from the outside, not as a statue or a scholar, but as a tired, sandaled person wandering through it, wondering if anyone ever actually ties a hymation right the first time. Spoiler, they don't. A breeze moves across your skin. The oil lamp dims. Leonidas stirs behind the amphora. Somewhere a woman sings to her child, just a few notes barely there. You pull your cloak up to your chin. The room darkens. You've done what few ever manage. You've lived a day in ancient Greece. You didn't conquer. You didn't become a hero or get turned into a constellation. But you lived. You walked among philosophers and fig vendors. You scraped oil from your skin and ideas from the air. You listened to gods. You sweated in democracy. And you slept, however imperfectly, with the past as your pillow. Tuck yourself in. Slow your breathing. Let the moon roll gently over the rooftops. Let the cicadas chant one last lullaby. Let the past keep you company tonight. I'll be here with another story for you tomorrow night.